What if I told you that 8 simple laws, discovered over 2,000 years ago, could completely rewire your brain and transform how you experience life? What if these ancient principles could make you unshakable in the face of adversity, crystal clear in your decision-making, and genuinely content regardless of your circumstances? Today, we're diving deep into 8 brutal Stoic laws that don't just sound nice in theory. They'll fundamentally change how your mind operates. These aren't feel-good platitudes. These are harsh truths that the greatest minds in history used to build unbreakable mental fortitude. But here's the thing: knowledge without action is worthless. So as we explore each law, I want you to think about how you can immediately apply it to your life. And speaking of action, if this content helps you even slightly, hit that subscribe button right now. Your future self will thank you, and you'll be helping us reach more people who desperately need this wisdom. Also, make sure to check the link in the first comment and description. I've put together some exclusive resources that will accelerate your Stoic journey beyond what we can cover in this video. Now, let's begin your mental transformation. Fair warning: these laws are brutal because they force you to confront uncomfortable truths about yourself and reality. But that's exactly why they work. The first and most fundamental Stoic law will immediately separate you from 99% of people who waste their lives in mental chaos. Epictetus, who went from slave to one of history's greatest philosophers, put it simply: some things are within our power, while others are not. This sounds obvious, but here's the brutal truth. You're probably spending most of your mental energy on things completely outside your control. Your boss's mood, the weather, other people's opinions, traffic, the economy, your past mistakes, your uncertain future. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the ancient world, wrote in his personal journal, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Think about that. The Emperor of Rome, with unlimited external power, found his greatest strength in understanding what he couldn't control. Here's what you can control: your thoughts, your responses, your actions, your effort, your character, and your choices. That's it. Everything else is outside your sphere of influence. But here's where it gets brutal. Accepting this law means taking 100% responsibility for your internal state while releasing attachment to external outcomes. It means you can no longer blame your mood on traffic, your anger on other people's behavior, or your anxiety on uncertain circumstances. Let me give you a practical example. You're stuck in traffic, late for an important meeting. The old you gets frustrated, honks the horn, checks the time obsessively, and arrives stressed and scattered. The Stoic you recognizes that traffic is outside your control. You focus on what you can control, calling ahead to inform about the delay, using the time to mentally prepare for the meeting, or practicing breathing exercises. The result? You arrive calm, focused, and mentally sharp, regardless of the external circumstances. This law will rewire your brain because it forces you to redirect all that wasted mental energy from external chaos to internal mastery. You'll stop being a victim of circumstances and become the architect of your responses. Start implementing this today. When you feel stressed or upset, ask yourself, is this within my control? If not, let it go. If yes, take action. This simple question will transform your mental landscape. Here's a brutal truth that modern society desperately wants to avoid. Comfort is the enemy of growth, and discomfort is your greatest teacher. The Stoics understood that deliberately seeking discomfort builds the mental muscle you need for life's inevitable challenges. Seneca, one of Rome's wealthiest men, regularly practiced voluntary poverty. He would sleep on the floor, eat simple food, and wear basic clothes. Why? Because he understood that comfort makes you weak and dependent, while discomfort makes you strong and resilient. This law will rewire your brain by changing your relationship with difficulty. Instead of avoiding challenges, you'll start seeking them. Instead of fearing discomfort, you'll embrace it as a signal that you're growing. Think about it. Every skill you've ever developed required discomfort. Learning to walk meant falling repeatedly. Building muscle means tearing muscle fibers. Developing emotional resilience means facing emotional challenges. The pattern is universal. Growth requires discomfort. But here's where most people get it wrong. They wait for discomfort to find them, then resist it when it arrives. Stoics do the opposite. They voluntarily seek discomfort when they're strong, so they're prepared when involuntary discomfort arrives. Modern applications of this law are everywhere. Take cold showers to build mental toughness. Fast occasionally to appreciate abundance. Exercise when you don't feel like it to develop discipline. Have difficult conversations to build courage. Sleep on the floor sometimes to reduce attachment to luxury. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." Each time you choose discomfort over comfort, you're ending your old, weak self and beginning your new, stronger self. Here's the brutal part. This law requires you to go against every modern instinct. Our culture sells comfort, convenience, and ease. But the Stoics knew that a life of ease produces a weak mind, while a life of chosen difficulty produces an unbreakable spirit. The neuroscience backs this up. When you regularly expose yourself to manageable stress and discomfort, you literally rewire your brain's stress response system. You become more resilient, more adaptable, and more confident in your ability to handle whatever life throws at you. Start small. Choose one small discomfort today and embrace it fully. Notice how it feels to lean into difficulty instead of away from it. This is how you build the mental strength that will serve you for life. This law might be the most brutal of all, but it's also the most liberating. The Stoics practiced memento mori, remembering death, not to be morbid, but to live more fully. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself that his time was limited, and this awareness guided every decision. Here's the brutal truth. You're going to die, everyone you love is going to die, and everything you're worried about will be irrelevant in 100 years. This isn't pessimistic. It's the ultimate perspective tool. When you truly internalize your mortality, several things happen immediately. First, you stop wasting time on trivial concerns. Second, you prioritize what actually matters. Third, you become grateful for what you have right now. Fourth, you develop courage because you realize that the worst thing that can happen, death, is inevitable anyway. Seneca wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." He practiced this by imagining this was his last day alive. How would he treat people? What would he focus on? What would he let go of? This law rewires your brain by providing ultimate clarity about what matters. When you remember that your time is finite, you stop tolerating toxic relationships, meaningless activities, and petty concerns. You start living with intention and urgency. But here's where it gets practical. The Stoics didn't just think about death abstractly. They used it as a daily decision-making tool. Before reacting in anger, they'd ask, "Will this matter when I'm on my deathbed?" Before pursuing a goal, they'd ask, "Is this how I want to spend my limited time?" This perspective is incredibly freeing. It liberates you from the fear of failure because you realize that not trying is the real failure. It frees you from the need for approval because you understand that everyone's opinion will be forgotten. It releases you from perfectionism because you see that done is better than perfect when time is limited. Modern psychology calls this post-traumatic growth, the idea that confronting mortality can lead to greater appreciation for life. The Stoics discovered this principle 2,000 years ago and built it into their daily practice. Try this exercise. Imagine you have exactly 1 year to live. What would you change? What would you start? What would you stop? What would you say to the people you love? Now ask yourself, why aren't you making these changes today? Death isn't the enemy. It's the advisor that helps you live authentically. When you embrace this law, you'll stop postponing your real life and start living it immediately. Here's a brutal truth that will immediately improve your decision-making. Your emotions are not facts, they're not commands, and they're not always accurate reflections of reality. The Stoics understood that emotions are initial impressions that can be examined, questioned, and often dismissed. Epictetus taught that we're not disturbed by events themselves, but by our judgments about events. This means your emotional reaction is not caused by what happens to you. It's caused by what you think about what happens to you. This law will rewire your brain by creating space between stimulus and response. Instead of being hijacked by every emotional impulse, you'll develop the ability to observe your emotions without being controlled by them. Think about the last time you were angry. You probably felt like your anger was justified, necessary, and accurate. But here's what the Stoics knew. Anger is just one possible response to a situation. You could also respond with curiosity, compassion, humor, or indifference. The emotion you experience depends on the story you tell yourself about the situation. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "How much trouble he avoids who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does, but only to what he does himself." He understood that most emotional suffering comes from comparing, judging, and creating narratives about things outside our control. Here's the practical application. When you feel a strong emotion, pause and ask yourself 3 questions. First, what story am I telling myself about this situation? Second, is this story definitely true? Third, what other stories could explain this situation? This isn't about suppressing emotions or pretending they don't exist. It's about recognizing that emotions are information, not instructions. They tell you something about your current mental state, but they don't dictate your actions. The brutal part of this law is that it removes your excuse for bad behavior. You can no longer say, "I couldn't help it, I was angry." You can no longer blame your reactions on other people's actions. You become 100% responsible for your responses, regardless of your emotional state. But here's the liberation. When you realize you're not at the mercy of your emotions, you become incredibly powerful. You can feel fear and act courageously. You can feel sadness and still function effectively. You can feel anger and respond with wisdom. The neuroscience supports this. The space between emotional trigger and response is where your prefrontal cortex, your rational mind, can intervene. The more you practice observing emotions without immediately reacting, the stronger this mental muscle becomes. Start practicing this today. When you feel a strong emotion, instead of immediately acting on it, pause and say, "I notice I'm feeling emotion. This is information, not a command. How do I want to respond?" This law will completely reframe how you measure success and happiness. The Stoics believed that virtue, wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance is the only thing that's always good, regardless of circumstances. Everything else, wealth, fame, pleasure, even health, can be used for good or evil depending on how you apply it. Here's the brutal truth. You've probably been chasing things that can't actually make you happy. Money can make you greedy or generous. Fame can make you arrogant or inspiring. Power can make you tyrannical or benevolent. But virtue always makes you better. Marcus Aurelius, who had unlimited wealth and power, wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." He understood that external goods are neutral. It's your character that determines their value. This law rewires your brain by shifting your focus from external acquisition to internal development. Instead of asking, "How can I get more?" you start asking, "How can I become better?" Instead of measuring success by what you have, you measure it by who you are. Think about someone you truly admire. I guarantee it's not because of their possessions or achievements. It's because of their character, their integrity, their courage, their wisdom, their compassion. These are the qualities that actually matter, and they're completely within your control to develop. Seneca, one of the wealthiest men in Rome, regularly gave away his possessions and lived simply. He understood that attachment to external goods makes you vulnerable, while commitment to virtue makes you unshakable. Here's the practical application. Start evaluating your decisions based on virtue instead of outcome. Before making a choice, ask yourself, will this make me more wise, just, courageous, or temperate? If yes, do it regardless of the external consequences. If no, avoid it regardless of the external benefits. This doesn't mean you ignore practical concerns or live in poverty. It means you prioritize character development over external accumulation. You can pursue wealth, but not at the expense of integrity. You can seek recognition, but not at the cost of honesty. You can enjoy pleasures, but not to the point of losing self-control. The brutal part of this law is that it removes most of your excuses for unethical behavior. You can't justify lying to get ahead, cheating to win, or betraying others for personal gain. Virtue becomes your non-negotiable standard. But here's the incredible benefit. When you commit to virtue, regardless of consequences, you develop unshakable self-respect. You know that no matter what happens externally, you've maintained your integrity. This creates a deep sense of satisfaction that no external achievement can match. The ancient Stoics proved this principle. They faced exile, poverty, persecution, and death, but maintained their peace of mind because their sense of worth came from their character, not their circumstances. Start implementing this today. Choose one virtue, wisdom, justice, courage, or temperance, and look for opportunities to practice it. Notice how different it feels to measure yourself by your character instead of your achievements. Here's a brutal reality check. You don't live in the past or the future. You live in the present moment. Yet most people spend their mental energy everywhere except where their actual life is happening. The Stoics understood that the present moment is the only place where you have any power. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." This wasn't philosophical poetry. It was practical wisdom. The past is gone and unchangeable. The future is uncertain and largely outside your control. The present moment is where your life actually exists and where you can actually take action. This law will rewire your brain by training you to focus your attention where it can actually make a difference. Instead of ruminating about past mistakes or worrying about future problems, you'll learn to direct your mental energy toward what you can do right now. Think about how much mental energy you waste on regret and anxiety. Regret is just wishing the unchangeable past was different. Anxiety is just imagining negative futures that may never happen. Both are forms of mental time travel that rob you of present moment power. The brutal truth is that most of your suffering happens in your mind, not in reality. You suffer more in imagination than in actuality. When you're fully present, you're usually fine. It's when your mind wanders to past failures or future fears that you experience emotional pain. Seneca practiced this by regularly asking himself, "What can I do right now?" Not tomorrow, not after this problem is solved, not when conditions are perfect, right now. This question immediately brings you back to your sphere of influence. Here's the practical application. Whenever you notice your mind wandering to past or future, gently bring it back to the present by engaging your senses. What do you see, hear, feel, smell, or taste right now? This simple practice grounds you in reality instead of mental stories. The Stoics also used present moment awareness to appreciate what they had. Instead of taking their health, relationships, and circumstances for granted, they practiced gratitude for their current experience. This created contentment regardless of external conditions. But here's where it gets challenging. Being present requires giving up the illusion of control over past and future. You have to accept that you can't change what happened or guarantee what will happen. You can only influence what's happening right now. This is actually incredibly liberating. When you stop trying to control the uncontrollable, you can focus all your energy on what you can actually influence. Your current thoughts, current actions, current responses, current choices. The neuroscience supports this principle. Mindfulness and present moment awareness literally change your brain structure, reducing activity in areas associated with rumination and worry while strengthening areas associated with attention and emotional regulation. Try this exercise. Set random alarms throughout your day. When they go off, pause and ask yourself, "Where's my mind right now?" If it's in the past or future, gently bring it back to the present. Notice how different it feels to be fully here instead of mentally elsewhere. This law might be the most mind-bending of all. You are not your thoughts. You are the observer of your thoughts. The Stoics understood that thoughts arise automatically, but you have the power to examine them, question them, and choose which ones to follow. Marcus Aurelius constantly practiced this in his personal journal, examining his thoughts and correcting unhelpful patterns. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Here's the brutal truth. Most of your thoughts are not helpful, not accurate, and not worth following. Your mind produces thousands of thoughts per day, most of them repetitive, negative, or completely irrelevant to your current situation. If you believe and follow every thought, you'll live in chaos. This law rewires your brain by creating psychological distance between you and your mental chatter. Instead of being swept away by every thought, you develop the ability to observe your thinking patterns and choose your responses consciously. Think about the voice in your head right now. It's probably commenting on what I'm saying, making judgments, creating associations, or wandering to completely unrelated topics. That voice is not you. It's just mental activity that you can observe. Epictetus taught his students to examine their thoughts, like a philosopher examining evidence. Is this thought true? Is it helpful? Is it based on facts or assumptions? Does following this thought lead to virtue or vice? Here's the practical application. Start noticing your thoughts without immediately believing them. When you have a negative thought about yourself, pause and ask, is this thought definitely true? What evidence supports it? What evidence contradicts it? How would I respond if a friend had this thought about themselves? The brutal part of this law is that it removes your excuse for negative thinking patterns. You can no longer say, I can't help thinking this way. You can't control which thoughts arise, but you can absolutely control which thoughts you engage with and believe. But here's the incredible freedom. When you realize you're not your thoughts, you stop being a victim of your own mind. You can have anxious thoughts without being anxious. You can have angry thoughts without acting angry. You can have self-critical thoughts without believing them. The Stoics practiced this through daily reflection, examining their thoughts and correcting unhelpful patterns. They understood that mental discipline is just as important as physical discipline. Modern cognitive behavioral therapy is based on this ancient Stoic principle. The idea that changing your thoughts changes your emotions and behaviors was revolutionary in psychology, but the Stoics were practicing it 2,000 years ago. Start implementing this today. When you notice a strong emotional reaction, pause and examine the thought that triggered it. Ask yourself, what am I thinking about this situation? Is this thought helpful? What other ways could I think about this? The final law might be the most liberating of all. Pain is an inevitable part of life, but suffering is optional. Pain is what happens to you. Loss, disappointment, physical discomfort, failure. Suffering is what you add to pain through resistance, judgment, and mental stories. The Stoics understood that trying to avoid all pain is impossible and counterproductive. Instead, they focused on accepting pain when it comes while refusing to add unnecessary suffering through mental resistance. Marcus Aurelius faced plague, war, betrayal, and personal loss, yet maintained his equanimity by accepting pain without adding suffering. He wrote, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly." The additional suffering of surprise, resistance, and resentment when they occurred. Here's the brutal truth. Most of your suffering comes not from what happens to you, but from your resistance to what happens to you. You suffer when you insist that reality should be different than it is. You suffer when you fight against unchangeable circumstances. You suffer when you create stories about why bad things shouldn't happen to you. This law rewires your brain by teaching you to flow with reality instead of fighting against it. When pain comes, and it will, you learn to experience it fully without adding the extra layer of mental suffering. Think about the difference between physical pain and emotional suffering about that pain. A headache is pain. Worrying about what the headache means, getting angry that you have a headache, or catastrophizing about future headaches is suffering. The pain is unavoidable, but the suffering is optional. The same principle applies to emotional pain. Losing a job is painful. Creating stories about being a failure, worrying about the future, or resenting the unfairness is suffering. The loss is real, but the additional mental anguish is optional. Seneca practiced this by regularly imagining loss before it happened. He would mentally rehearse losing his wealth, his health, his loved ones, not to be negative, but to prepare his mind to accept these realities without additional suffering. Here's the practical application. When you experience pain or difficulty, ask yourself, what is the actual situation, and what stories am I adding to it? Separate the facts from your interpretations. Accept the facts completely while questioning your interpretations. The brutal part of this law is that it requires you to give up your victim stories. You can no longer indulge in self-pity or blame external circumstances for your internal state. You must take responsibility for your mental response to every situation. But here's the incredible benefit. When you stop adding suffering to pain, you become incredibly resilient. You can handle any situation because you're not fighting against reality. You're working with it. You experience pain when it comes, but you don't multiply it through resistance. This doesn't mean becoming passive or accepting injustice. It means accepting what is while working to improve what can be improved. You can feel grief without adding despair. You can experience failure without adding shame. You can face uncertainty without adding anxiety. These 8 brutal Stoic laws aren't just philosophical concepts. They're practical tools for rewiring your mind and transforming your life. But here's the crucial point. Knowledge without application is worthless. These laws only work if you work them. Let me be brutally honest with you. Implementing these laws will be difficult. They go against every modern instinct and cultural message. They require you to take responsibility, embrace discomfort, and give up comforting illusions. But that's exactly why they work. The ancient Stoics didn't develop these principles in comfortable circumstances. Marcus Aurelius wrote his Meditations while leading armies and managing an empire during a plague. Epictetus developed his philosophy while enslaved. Seneca practiced Stoicism while navigating the dangerous politics of imperial Rome. These weren't armchair philosophers. They were people facing real challenges who discovered practical wisdom that worked under pressure. That same wisdom is available to you today. Here's your action plan. Choose one law that resonates most strongly with you and focus on it for the next week. Don't try to implement all 8 at once. That's a recipe for failure. Master one principle before moving to the next. Remember, every expert was once a beginner. Every strong person was once weak. Every wise person was once confused. The difference between those who transform their lives and those who stay stuck is simple: action. If this video has helped you even slightly, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Your support helps us reach more people who need this ancient wisdom. Share this video with someone who could benefit from these principles. And don't forget to check the link in the first comment and description. I've created exclusive resources that will accelerate your Stoic journey beyond what we can cover in any single video. Leave a comment below telling me which law hit you the hardest and how you plan to implement it. Your commitment in writing will make you more likely to follow through, and your experience might inspire someone else who's struggling. The Stoics believed that philosophy isn't about clever arguments, it's about living well. These 8 laws have helped countless people throughout history build unshakable minds and meaningful lives. Now, it's your turn. Your transformation begins the moment you choose to apply these principles. The question isn't whether these laws work. The question is whether you'll work them. The choice, as always, is yours. Remember, you have everything you need to build an extraordinary life. These 8 laws are your blueprint. Now go build something amazing.